70s, late 70s and the 80s, I was the absolute governor on the cobbles. No one in England could beat.
London in the 60s, 70s and into the 80s would be full of famous faces, gangsters and hard men, but none would become more infamous than Lenny the Governor McLean, standing 6'3" and at his prime, weighing well over 20 stone. Lenny would carve a reputation with his extreme aggression and brutality. Leonard John McLean, or Lenny for short, was born on the 9th of April 1949 in Hoxton, London. Lenny was born into a large working class family in the East End of London. His father, Leonard Sr., had been a Royal Marine during World War II. But after catching a disease at his time during war, Lenny's father would go on to be a petty criminal and a swindler. He would die when Lenny was around 4 years old. Lenny's mother Rose would go on to marry again. She would marry a petty criminal by the name of Jim Irwin. Jim was a violent alcoholic and would abuse Lenny and his brothers for many years. This would cause the rage and anger to build up inside of Lenny. After Lenny's younger brother Raymond had received a particularly vicious beating one time, Lenny's great uncle, a well-known local gangster by the name of Jimmy Spinks, would attack his stepfather, nearly killing him, and threatened to cut his throat if he ever went near Lenny or any of his brothers again. Lenny would admire his uncle and would learn a valuable lesson that day, and so Lenny would begin fighting back. Lenny was a huge and powerful man, full of so much explosive rage. Growing up, Lenny would enter the world of street fighting and would earn the name 10 Men Len, as it said it would often take that many men to drag Lenny off an opponent. And during his teenage years, Lenny would hang around various local criminals, leading to him being arrested and receiving an 18-month prison sentence for petty crimes. But Lenny was not a criminal, he just wanted to fight. And around the age of 15, Lenny realised he could earn a living and good money by using his fists. But Lenny's first unlicensed fight would happen because of a chance meeting with an old associate called Kenny Mack. After Lenny's car had broken down in the Blackwall Tunnel, he abandoned it and went to buy a replacement from Kenny Mack. Kenny Mack was a used car salesman based in Hackney. He would give Lenny a replacement car. But that car would also break down as well, so Lenny, understandably, was very annoyed at this point, so would return to Kenny Mack's yard to demand his money back, and eventually they would come to an agreement. Kenny would offer Lenny a new car in exchange for Lenny fighting in one of his unlicensed boxing matches scheduled for later that night. And Lenny being Lenny, of course he accepted. Lenny would go on to win the fight in under 1 minute in spectacular fashion, earning himself a £500 cash prize, which was quite a lot of money back then. Frank Warren, the famous boxing promoter who founded Queensberry Promotions and also managed many famous fighters, Tyson Fury and Daniel Dubois, just to name a few, happened to be Lenny's cousin. Frank Warren had formed the National Boxing Council in the 1970s, which would allow the toughest fighters in Britain to compete legally. Lenny, unable to become a licensed boxer due to his violent reputation and lengthy criminal record, would have to enter the unlicensed world. Although legal, it would not be sanctioned by the British Boxing Board of Control. Lenny quickly became one of its brightest stars and had a fearsome reputation. And it's around this time that Lenny would have his famous trilogy of unlicensed fights with his biggest rival, Roy Pretty Boy Shaw. Roy Shaw was a well-known and fearsome fighter at the time, a man with a long criminal record but a very short temper. Roy was a legend in his own right amongst the underworld, and the two men's rivalry would become famous. Roy would win the first fight due to having more boxing knowledge and managed to get the better of Lenny. Lenny admitted himself he didn't train or really take it serious back then, as he never really needed to, but the second fight would be a completely different story. Lenny would train for the second fight and get himself in great fighting shape. And this would be shown when Lenny would brutally knock Roy out in the first round of the second fight. Lenny would go on to win the third fight in a similar fashion, and this is a time when Lenny would gain his famous nickname, the Guvnor. Although Lenny would claim to have never lost a fight, this however would not be true. Lenny would also be challenged on multiple occasions and would refuse to fight. Bartley Gallman, the king of the gypsies, would publicly challenge Lenny, but Lenny would refuse to fight. And David Bomber Pearce, the hard-hitting British heavyweight champion from Newport, would also challenge Lenny, but Lenny also declined to fight. Cliff Field. Cliff Field was a great boxer and another well-known British fighter at the time. Cliff would have 2 unlicensed fights with Lenny, winning on both occasions by knockout. But Lenny was never a real boxer. Lenny was a brawler and a street fighter who relied on power and aggression rather than technique. Lenny later claimed to have had over 4,000 fights and never lost on the cobbles. With Lenny's fame now as a fighter, he would now start working as a bouncer on the doors. Later he would become known as the King of the Bouncers. Lenny would control the doors of many of the pubs and clubs in London, even the famous Hippodrome in Leicester Square. He also held joint ownership of a pub in the East End of London, named the Guvnor's, along with Charlie Cray, the older brother of the famous Cray twins. Lenny would also be a minder, which means a bodyguard, to many celebrities. After being a bodyguard for a few celebrities, Lenny would do some work for Mike Reid and Freddie Starr. Mike Reid, who was famous for playing the role of Frank Butcher in EastEnders, would help Lenny make industry connections and would introduce Lenny to an acting agent. Lenny's acting career would begin with a small unbilled cameo as a ringside spectator in the drama film The Craze. Lenny then played the part of a gangster called Eddie Davis in ITV's customs drama The Knock. And he would also have a small part as a police chief in the 1997 film The Fifth Element, but his largest and most famous role would be in Guy Ritchie's film Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, playing the part of the criminal enforcer Barry the Baptist. But during the filming of Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, Lenny would fall ill with what he believed to be just a common flu. However, further X-ray tests would show he was suffering from lung cancer, and tragically, Lenny would pass away shortly afterwards, on the 28th of July 1998, sadly leaving his wife Valerie and his 2 children, his son Jamie and his daughter Kelly McLean. Lenny would describe his family as his rock. Lenny loved his family greatly and was a proud family man. But Lenny McLean's legend would live on, arguably becoming more famous in his death, with countless movies and documentaries being made about his life. This has been the story of Lenny the Guvnor McLean. If you like the content, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.